Chicago had a way of making wealth look effortless. On summer evenings, expensive restaurants filled with people who never checked menu prices. Black SUVs waited beneath hotel awnings, chauffeurs opened doors, and champagne appeared before anyone asked. In that world, Vanessa Cole seemed perfectly at home. At 34, Vanessa had never built a career anyone could easily explain. There was no office she reported to, no company listed beside her name, and no predictable paycheck. Yet she lived in a glass-walled apartment overlooking the river, carried designer handbags, and moved through Chicago's private lounges as though she belonged. People noticed. Vanessa knew exactly how to make them notice. She dressed carefully, spoke softly, and listened more than she talked. Men often mistook her attention for innocence. She remembered birthdays, favorite wines, old stories, and the names of their children. She remembered what each man feared losing. Some feared growing old alone. Others feared becoming irrelevant. And some simply feared that their money could no longer buy affection. Vanessa understood those weaknesses almost instinctively. Her relationships rarely began with demands. She allowed generosity to feel like the man's idea. A dinner became a weekend away. A weekend became jewelry. Jewelry became rent, travel, or access to another luxurious circle. By the time a man realized how much he had given, he usually believed he had received something priceless in return. Attention, affection, the illusion of being chosen. Then, one humid Thursday evening, Vanessa entered an exclusive Chicago lounge beneath a hotel downtown. The room was dim and private. Gold light reflected from crystal glasses, while music floated above conversations. Vanessa paused near the entrance, scanning the room without appearing to search. That was when she noticed Robert Hale. Robert was 52, divorced, and worth more money than he discussed publicly. His real estate company owned apartment buildings across Chicago, and his name appeared regularly in business magazines. Yet there was something lonely about him. He sat alone. Vanessa recognized loneliness before she recognized wealth. Within minutes, they spoke. Robert smiled when she asked about the photograph of his daughter on his phone. Vanessa did not flirt immediately. Instead, she listened while he talked about family, business, and the years since his divorce. When she finally touched his arm, Robert looked at her differently. Their relationship accelerated. Within weeks, Vanessa was joining Robert at charity dinners and traveling with him on weekends. He introduced her to friends as someone special. Vanessa never corrected him. But Robert began noticing small things. Her affection seemed warmer after expensive gifts. Her mood improved whenever he offered another trip. When he mentioned slowing down financially, her enthusiasm suddenly cooled. One evening, after dinner, Robert placed his credit card on the table. Vanessa glanced at it and smiled. "You make everything so easy," she whispered. Robert laughed, but something inside him tightened. For the first time, he wondered whether she loved him, or simply loved the life he could provide. 3 nights later, Robert's phone vibrated beside his bed. There was no name attached to the message. Only one sentence appeared on the screen. "You don't know who you're sleeping with." Robert stared at it for several seconds. Then he looked across the room at Vanessa, sleeping peacefully beneath expensive white sheets. For the first time, he felt afraid. The anonymous message changed something in Robert. He never mentioned it to Vanessa that morning. Instead, he watched her from across the kitchen while she poured coffee into a porcelain cup she had bought during one of their trips to New York. She looked calm, untouched by the warning that had kept him awake. Vanessa noticed his silence. "What's wrong?" Robert locked his phone. "Nothing. Just work." She smiled, walked around the counter, and kissed his cheek. For a moment, his suspicion weakened. That was Vanessa's gift. She knew how to make doubt feel cruel. Over the following weeks, Robert convinced himself the message was jealousy. Vanessa remained affectionate, attentive, and perfectly composed. She sent him photographs during the day, called before important meetings, and appeared genuinely interested in his business. But there were moments he could not explain. Sometimes she stepped onto the balcony to answer calls. Sometimes she turned her phone face down when he entered the room. And sometimes, late at night, Robert noticed her typing messages while pretending to be asleep. Vanessa was not simply chasing money. Money represented something deeper to her. She had grown up understanding what happened when security disappeared. She remembered unpaid bills, empty cupboards, and the humiliation of watching other families live comfortably while hers struggled. As an adult, she had promised herself that she would never again depend on someone who could walk away and leave her with nothing. Control became her protection. If she could make people need her, she believed they could not abandon her. That belief shaped every relationship she entered. Robert was not the only man receiving attention. There was another phone, hidden beneath folded clothes in her bedroom drawer. Its messages came from a man named Marcus Reed. Marcus was 41, recently divorced, and financially successful after selling his technology company. Marcus had not recovered emotionally from his marriage. His former wife had left him unexpectedly, and he carried the quiet insecurity of a man who no longer trusted his own judgment. Vanessa saw it immediately. She met Marcus at a dinner hosted by Robert's business associates. Vanessa remembered everything he said about his very painful divorce. Later that night, she sent him a message. "You seem distracted tonight. Hope you're okay." Marcus stared at the screen before answering. Nobody had asked him that in months. Their conversations quickly became intimate. Vanessa told him things she had never told Robert. Others were carefully exaggerated. She made Marcus believe there was a wounded woman beneath her glamorous exterior, someone who desperately wanted to be understood. Marcus believed her. Soon, he was sending flowers, then gifts, then promises. Robert eventually noticed. One evening, he asked Vanessa directly about Marcus. "Why is he texting you?" Vanessa's expression hardened. "You went through my phone? I saw his name. So now I'm not allowed to have friends." "That isn't what I said." "No," Vanessa replied. "You just decided I'm guilty before asking me." Robert felt the argument slipping away from him. "I don't know what to believe anymore." Vanessa looked wounded. "That hurts more than you realize." She walked into the bedroom and closed the door. Robert remained alone in the living room, suddenly wondering whether his suspicion had made him the villain. Inside, Vanessa waited until she heard the front door close. Then she smiled. She returned to the bedroom and placed two phones beside each other on the table. One belonged to Robert. The other belonged to Marcus. Two men. Two versions of herself. Two lives beginning to collide. And Vanessa knew that sooner or later, she would have to choose which one survived. The two phones remained on Vanessa's table long after midnight. She had not chosen between the men. Instead, she had fallen asleep believing she could keep both worlds separate. By morning, however, something else demanded her attention. Vanessa woke with a headache and a heaviness she could not explain. For several days, she had felt exhausted, but she blamed the late nights, the traveling, and the stress of keeping her relationships apart. That morning, she finally decided to visit a clinic. She used a different name when she made the appointment. The waiting room was nearly empty. Pale sunlight crossed the floor through narrow windows, and the quiet made every cough sound painfully loud. Vanessa sat alone, gripping her handbag while her phone vibrated repeatedly. Robert. Then Marcus. She silenced both. When the nurse called her name, Vanessa stood and followed her down a hallway. The doctor entered several minutes later carrying a folder. He sat across from her. "Vanessa, your test came back positive." She stared at him. For what? The doctor paused. HIV. For several seconds, she did not move. The words seemed to float between them, detached from reality. Vanessa looked at the doctor's face, waiting for him to correct himself. He didn't. Her first reaction was disbelief. That can't be right. We repeated the test. No. Her voice cracked. The doctor explained that treatment could allow people with HIV to live long and healthy lives. He talked about medical care, monitoring, and the importance of informing recent partners. Vanessa heard almost none of it. One thought kept repeating. Robert. Then Marcus. She imagined their faces, their questions, their anger, their disgust. She imagined losing everything. The apartment, the jewelry, the invitations, the carefully constructed life she had spent years building. Most of all, she imagined losing control. Outside the clinic, Vanessa sat inside her car for nearly an hour. Rain began tapping against the windshield. She cried at first. Then the tears stopped. Memories began arriving in fragments. A childhood apartment with peeling paint. Her mother counting coins at the kitchen table. A landlord shouting through a doorway. Vanessa hiding beneath a blanket while adults argued in the next room. She remembered promising herself that she would never be powerless again. Years later came another memory. A boyfriend who controlled her money, criticized her appearance, and threatened to leave whenever she refused his demands. Vanessa had learned then that affection could become a weapon. Those memories did not excuse what she was becoming, but they helped explain why control had become so important to her. That evening, Vanessa opened a black notebook she had bought months earlier. She began writing. At first, the words were scattered. Anger, fear, betrayal, shame. Then her handwriting became steadier. She wrote about men who had used women. Men who had promised love and disappeared. Men who believed money gave them the right to possess someone. Then she wrote about Robert. Then Marcus. Her pen stopped. For a long time, Vanessa stared at the blank page. Finally, she wrote one sentence. If they only love me because of what I give them, then maybe they deserve to lose something too. She closed the notebook. Neither Robert nor Marcus knew about the diagnosis. And Vanessa had not yet decided whether that silence would remain a secret or become a weapon. Before leaving her bedroom, Vanessa opened the two phones again. Robert had sent a message asking when he could see her. Marcus had written that he missed her already. She read both messages twice. A different woman might have seen them as two opportunities to tell the truth. Vanessa saw two doors closing around her. She placed the phones face down, opened the notebook once more, and began writing names. Names she could not bear to lose, and secrets she was no longer certain she could carry alone without anyone knowing. Without telling either man yet. The names in Vanessa's notebook stayed hidden beneath a stack of magazines, but the secrets attached to them were becoming harder to contain. Robert was the first to change. A few weeks after receiving the anonymous warning, he began feeling unusually tired. At first, he blamed long hours and business travel. Then came night sweats, headaches, and a persistent weakness that made ordinary meetings feel exhausting. His doctor ordered tests, but nothing immediately explained the symptoms. Robert remembered the message. You don't know who you're sleeping with. He began watching Vanessa differently. Meanwhile, Marcus was moving in the opposite direction. He wanted certainty. One Saturday afternoon, he took Vanessa to a quiet restaurant overlooking the river. After dinner, he reached across the table and took her hand. I want us to stop pretending this is temporary, he said. Vanessa looked at him. What do you mean? I want you to move in with me. For one terrifying second, Vanessa could not breathe. She could have told him everything. Instead, she smiled. I need time. Marcus squeezed her hand. I can wait. Those words made Vanessa feel worse. She knew she was being given another chance to tell the truth, and once again, she chose silence. Robert's opportunity came 3 days later. He asked Vanessa whether she had recently visited a medical clinic. She froze for half a second before laughing. Why would you ask that? Because you've been acting differently. You're imagining things. Robert wanted to believe her, but belief was becoming difficult. He began quietly checking the stories she had told him. Dates did not match. Restaurants she claimed to have visited with friends appeared in photographs connected to other men. A hotel reservation revealed that she had spent a weekend away when she had told Robert she was visiting family. Eventually, Robert hired a private investigator. His name was Daniel Mercer, a discreet former police investigator who specialized in financial and relationship cases. Daniel spent several days tracing Vanessa's movements. What he discovered disturbed Robert. Vanessa had maintained relationships with several wealthy men at the same time. Some had purchased jewelry. Others had paid bills, vacations, or deposits on apartments. Then Daniel found something more alarming. One of Vanessa's former lovers, a businessman named Paul Whitaker, had recently tested positive for HIV. Robert stared at the report without speaking. "There's more," Daniel said. "What?" "Paul says Vanessa knew about his diagnosis before he did." Robert's stomach tightened. That evening, he confronted Vanessa. She was standing beside the bedroom window when he entered. "Tell me about Paul." Her face changed. "I don't know what you're talking about." "You knew he was sick." Vanessa's voice rose. "You've been spying on me?" "I've been trying to understand who you are. You don't own me, Robert. This isn't about ownership." "Yes, it is." "No," he said quietly. "It's about the truth." Vanessa looked away. Robert stepped closer. "I don't care about the money. I don't care about Marcus. I care that you knew something that could affect my life, and you kept it from me." For the first time, Vanessa had no convincing answer. Robert left. The door slammed behind him. Vanessa stood alone, staring at the empty hallway. Until that moment, secrecy had felt like protection. Now it felt like a trap. Robert had the investigator. Paul had the diagnosis. Marcus was getting closer. And Vanessa suddenly understood that if the truth came out, she could lose everything. Fear hardened into something darker. Desperation. She returned to the bedroom and locked the door. Her hands trembled as she opened the notebook. The sentence she had written days earlier seemed different now. She deserved to be safe. She deserved control. She deserved something. But the words sounded less convincing each time she repeated them. Outside, Chicago traffic moved through the darkness, indifferent to the private disaster unfolding above the streets. Vanessa looked. Robert's departure left Vanessa staring at the locked bedroom door, but the consequences of that confrontation were already moving beyond her control. Marcus noticed the change first. Vanessa had become harder to reach. Calls went unanswered for hours. Messages that once arrived within minutes now appeared late at night, accompanied by vague explanations about work, headaches, or family problems. Marcus wanted to believe her. Then he learned about Robert. A mutual acquaintance mentioned that Robert had hired someone to investigate Vanessa. Marcus dismissed it as jealousy until he noticed a black sedan parked outside Vanessa's building on 2 consecutive evenings. When he asked her about it, Vanessa became frightened. "Robert is watching me," she whispered. Marcus's expression hardened. "Why?" "I don't know. He doesn't accept that we're finished." The lie was carefully chosen. Vanessa never told Marcus that Robert had discovered the truth. Instead, she presented herself as a woman trapped between 2 men, vulnerable and frightened. Marcus believed her. His protectiveness quickly replaced suspicion. Meanwhile, Robert was receiving information of his own. Daniel Mercer had traced Vanessa's medical history far enough to establish an unsettling timeline. Records suggested Vanessa had learned about her HIV status before her relationship with Robert became intimate. Robert read the report twice, then a third time. The question that haunted him was no longer whether Vanessa had deceived him. It was whether she had knowingly put him at risk. Daniel warned him not to confront her again without understanding the situation. But Robert wanted answers. Marcus wanted answers too. Marcus eventually visited Vanessa while she was away from home. He told himself he was checking on her, but his uneasiness had grown too strong to ignore. While waiting in her apartment, he noticed a folder partially hidden beneath a stack of books. He opened it. Inside were medical documents. Marcus read the first page and felt the room tilt. HIV. His eyes moved across the date. The diagnosis had been recorded before he and Vanessa had become intimate. He heard the front door. Vanessa entered and froze when she saw the papers in his hands. "What is this?" She moved toward him. "Marcus, listen to me." "You knew?" Her face tightened. "I was going to tell you." "When?" "I was scared." Marcus stared at her. "You let me believe everything was fine." Vanessa began crying. "I thought you'd leave." For a moment, Marcus softened. That was exactly what Vanessa needed. She stepped closer. "Robert has been threatening me. He's trying to destroy everything." Marcus looked toward the door. "Did he do this?" Vanessa said nothing. Her silence became an accusation. Across town, Robert received another message from Daniel. There was evidence that Vanessa had maintained several relationships at once. More importantly, Daniel had discovered that Marcus was one of them. Robert felt betrayed all over again. He drove toward Vanessa's building. Robert reached the lobby and saw Marcus's name on the visitor log. He stopped. Then the elevator doors opened. Marcus stepped out. The two men recognized each other immediately. Robert broke the silence. "You're Marcus." Marcus stared back. "And you're Robert." They stood facing each other, both expecting anger. Instead, confusion took its place. Robert asked the question first. "What did Vanessa tell you about me?" Marcus laughed bitterly. "That you're obsessed with her." Robert's expression changed. "She told me you're stalking her." Marcus went silent. Robert continued. "She said you were dangerous." Marcus swallowed. "She told me you were trying to control her." Neither man moved. Then Robert showed him the messages. Marcus showed Robert the medical paperwork. Neither could explain the sudden feeling that they had trusted the same woman and paid for it. Robert nodded slowly. "And she knew about the diagnosis." Neither man needed to say what came next. They had not been rivals. They had been victims of the same carefully constructed lie. And somewhere above them, Vanessa was still holding the two phones that had started everything. The silence between Robert and Marcus did not last long. They had spent years competing for Vanessa's attention without knowing they were standing on opposite sides of the same deception. Now, with the truth beginning to emerge, neither man wanted to walk away. They agreed to confront her together. By the time they reached Vanessa's building, evening had settled over Chicago. Rain streaked the lobby windows, turning the city lights into blurred ribbons of gold and red. Neither man spoke as the elevator climbed. Vanessa opened the door, expecting Marcus. Instead, she found both men standing there. For 1 second, her face revealed everything. Fear. Then the expression disappeared. "What are you doing here?" Robert stepped inside. "We know." Vanessa looked at Marcus. "You brought him here?" Marcus shook his head. "We came because you lied to both of us." Vanessa closed the door slowly. The apartment felt unusually quiet. Music played faintly from a speaker near the kitchen, but nobody paid attention to it. Robert placed the medical documents on the table. You knew before either of us. Vanessa stared at the papers. I was scared. That isn't an answer, Robert said. Marcus looked at her. You told me Robert was stalking you. He was investigating me. Because he found out you were hiding something. Vanessa's breathing became uneven. You both think you're innocent? Robert frowned. What does that mean? You think I chose you because of money. You did, Marcus said. Vanessa laughed bitterly. That is what you tell yourselves. She walked toward the window, folding her arms. You wanted a beautiful woman beside you. Robert wanted someone who made him look successful. Marcus wanted someone who made him feel young again. Marcus stared at her. I loved you. No, Vanessa replied. You loved how I made you feel. Robert stepped closer. This isn't about money. Everything was about money to you. No. This is about the truth. Vanessa turned around. Then tell me, Robert. What happens if I tell you everything? Do you suddenly become compassionate? Do you forgive me? Do you stay? Robert's voice dropped. Why didn't you tell us you were HIV positive? Vanessa said nothing. Why? He demanded. Her eyes filled with tears, but she refused to answer. Marcus stepped forward. You knew, Vanessa. I said I was scared. You knew, he repeated. The room seemed to shrink around them. Robert accused her of manipulating both men. Marcus accused her of destroying their lives. Vanessa answered every accusation with another accusation, dragging old wounds into the argument. She talked about poverty, about abandonment, about men who had controlled her, about being treated like something beautiful that could be bought. Her voice became louder. So did theirs. A neighbor later told police that shouting began shortly after 9. There was a crash. Then another. Someone screamed. The neighbor moved toward the door, listening. Then everything went silent. Inside the apartment, the confrontation had become something none of them could take back. When emergency responders arrived, they found Robert Hale and Marcus Reed dead. Vanessa was lying several feet away, injured but conscious. Police rushed inside. One officer asked what had happened. Vanessa opened her eyes. She looked terrified. They came here to kill me. The words hung in the apartment. Investigators would later discover that the scene contained details Vanessa had not mentioned. For now, however, officers had 3 bodies, 2 dead men, and 1 surviving woman whose story was already beginning to fall apart. And as detectives secured the apartment, one question quietly emerged above all the others. If Robert and Marcus had come expecting answers, why had neither of them left alive? The apartment itself offered no immediate explanation. A chair lay overturned near the dining table. A glass had shattered across the floor, scattering fragments beneath the furniture. Vanessa's handbag was open, its contents spilled beside the sofa. One of Robert's shoes had come loose, while Marcus's jacket was twisted beneath him. The officer separated Vanessa from the scene and asked the same questions repeatedly. Who started the fight? Why had the men come? What happened after the shouting began? Vanessa answered in fragments. She said Robert became aggressive. She said Marcus tried to protect her. She said she remembered falling, hearing something break, and then waking on the floor. But she never explained why both men were dead. Outside, police lights reflected against pavement as neighbors gathered outside the entrance. Upstairs, investigators photographed every room, objects, and every trace of the confrontation. The question of why 2 wealthy men had entered Vanessa's apartment and died there remained unanswered when Detective Elena Ramirez arrived before midnight. Elena had spent years investigating murders where emotion had destroyed the truth. She knew that frightened people remembered events selectively, especially when the truth threatened to ruin them. Vanessa's statement had sounded rehearsed from the moment she began speaking. They came here to kill me. Elena wrote the sentence in her notebook. Then she underlined it. Vanessa sat in a hospital room under police observation, her injuries treated but her expression carefully composed. She described Robert as increasingly jealous and Marcus as unexpectedly aggressive. According to her account, both men had confronted her, argued, and suddenly turned violent. Elena listened without interrupting. When Vanessa finished, Elena asked one question. "Why did they come here?" Vanessa looked away. "I told you. They were angry." "That isn't what I asked." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "They wanted to hurt me." Elena closed her notebook. "Then we'll find out." At the apartment, investigators reconstructed the final hours piece by piece. Security footage showed Robert entering the building alone. Marcus arrived later. Neither man appeared to be running, struggling, or being forced inside. They had come voluntarily. That detail immediately troubled Elena. Vanessa had described an ambush. The cameras suggested a meeting. Phone records made the situation darker. Robert had exchanged messages with a private investigator shortly before arriving. One message mentioned Vanessa's medical history. Marcus had separately searched for information about HIV and contacted someone about Vanessa's diagnosis. Both men knew. Both men had come anyway. Elena studied the timeline on a whiteboard in the temporary command room. Every minute seemed to narrow the possibilities. The men had arrived separately. They had entered willingly. They had confronted Vanessa. Then they died. But why? An evidence technician eventually brought Elena a black notebook recovered from Vanessa's bedroom. "Found this beneath some magazines." Elena opened it carefully. The pages contained Vanessa's private thoughts. She wrote about poverty, betrayal, wealthy men, abandonment, and the humiliation she believed she had suffered throughout her life. Several entries mentioned Robert and Marcus. One described Robert as another man who thinks money makes him important. Another called Marcus desperate to be loved. There were references to revenge. There were references to consequences. But nowhere did Vanessa directly write that she intended to kill either man. Elena closed the notebook. That absence mattered. So did everything surrounding it. Outside the station, Vanessa had already become a media sensation. News helicopters circled the neighborhood. Commentators debated whether she was a victim or a manipulator. Some described her as a glamorous woman attacked by jealous wealthy lovers. Others portrayed her as a calculating gold digger whose secrets had finally caught up with her. Photographs of Vanessa appeared across television screens and social media. She looked elegant in every image. Elena disliked that. Not because Vanessa was attractive, but because the public was becoming distracted by appearances. One officer entered the room carrying another folder. "Detective, reporters are calling her the Chicago gold digger." Elena barely looked up. "They can call her whatever they want." She returned to the timeline. The evidence did not yet prove who had caused the deaths. It did prove that Vanessa's version contained gaps. Elena gathered her team around the evidence board. "We're not investigating the woman the cameras see," she said. "We're investigating the woman who knew exactly what she was hiding." Nobody spoke. Elena pointed toward the photographs of Robert and Marcus. "Start with the diagnosis. Find out who knew, when they knew, and what happened after they found out." The investigation had changed direction. And somewhere inside Vanessa's carefully guarded past, Elena suspected, was the answer that could explain how two men walked into the same apartment alive, and never walked back out. Before dawn, Elena returned to the apartment alone. She studied the two phones recovered from the bedroom table. Their screens were dark, but their importance was obvious. She requested forensic copies immediately. If Vanessa had built two separate lives through those devices, one might contain the truth. For the first time that night, Elena wondered whether the murders had begun long before the confrontation. The investigation widened after Elena ordered her team to identify every man connected to Vanessa during the previous several years. What they found was a pattern. Vanessa rarely stayed alone for long. Her relationships overlapped, sometimes by weeks and sometimes by months. Most of the men were successful, older, divorced, or emotionally vulnerable. Money was never discussed openly at first. Yet gifts, hotel reservations, expensive dinners, and unexplained transfers appeared repeatedly in their records. Former lovers gave investigators conflicting portraits. One remembered Vanessa as affectionate and generous. He said she had once spent an entire night caring for him when he was sick. Another described her as controlling. "She could make you feel like the only man alive," he told Elena. "Then she'd disappear for 3 days." A third former partner admitted that Vanessa had pressured him for money after their relationship ended. He said she became furious when he refused. None of the stories alone proved anything. Together, they revealed something more disturbing. Vanessa seemed to understand exactly what each man needed emotionally, then used that knowledge to maintain control. One former lover named Daniel Price provided the most troubling detail. During an argument years earlier, Vanessa had told him that wealthy men deserved to be punished for treating women like they're disposable, she had said. At the time, Daniel thought she was speaking from bitterness. Now, sitting across from Elena, he wondered if he had misunderstood her entirely. Meanwhile, digital forensic specialists were working through Vanessa's old cloud accounts. Thousands of deleted files had been recovered, including photographs, financial records, and conversations she believed were gone forever. Then investigators found messages between Vanessa and Robert. The messages had been exchanged shortly before the confrontation. Robert had written that he knew she was hiding something and intended to expose her. Vanessa's replies were strangely calm. She did not deny knowing what he meant. Instead, she asked whether he was threatening her. Elena read the conversation twice. Vanessa appeared to know Robert was coming. That changed the case. Then Marcus's messages appeared. His final conversations were more frightening. Marcus had written to a friend that something about Vanessa was wrong. He said he had discovered information that frightened him and did not know whether he should confront her. One message stood out. "I don't think Robert is the danger." The next line was even more unsettling. "I think it's her." Elena leaned back from the monitor. Until that moment, investigators had been considering an explosive confrontation between 2 angry men and 1 frightened woman. Now another possibility emerged. What if Vanessa had anticipated the confrontation? What if she knew Robert and Marcus were coming? And what if she had prepared for it? Elena returned to the apartment and examined the recovered phones again. She wondered whether Vanessa had been documenting the collapse of her carefully controlled world. The forensic team searched every device for hidden recordings. Hours later, one analyst called Elena into the lab. "We found something." A deleted audio file had been recovered from Vanessa's phone. The recording was damaged, but technicians had restored enough of it to hear voices. Elena put on headphones. Static filled her ears. Then Robert spoke. His voice sounded tense. "Vanessa, we know what you did." A brief silence followed. Then came a sound Elena could not immediately identify. A sharp movement. Someone gasped. And suddenly, the recording ended. Elena removed the headphones slowly. Elena stared at the waveform. The recording had been deliberately deleted. Someone had wanted those final seconds erased. Someone had also failed to understand that digital evidence could survive long after memory, fear, and carefully constructed lies began to disappear completely and forever. Nobody in the room spoke. For the first time, she understood that the final confrontation might have been recorded from the beginning. And whatever happened after Robert spoke those words was still waiting inside the silence. The recovered recording followed Vanessa into the interrogation room. By then, her identity was beginning to collapse. Financial investigators had traced payments from former lovers into accounts Vanessa had never disclosed. Some transfers were large, while others were small, regular amounts revealing how Vanessa had learned to turn emotional attachment into financial security. Her journal was worse. Page after page contained thoughts about control, betrayal, abandonment, and revenge. She wrote about men as if they were pieces on a board, describing how easily affection could become leverage. Yet Elena noticed something unexpected. One name appeared differently. Robert. His name was surrounded by memories that were not entirely bitter. Vanessa had written about the first time he made her laugh, the evening he introduced her to his daughter, and the way he once stayed beside her after she became sick. There were even passages where she admitted loving him. That discovery complicated everything. Elena had expected to find a woman who saw every relationship as a transaction. Instead, she found someone capable of genuine attachment and equally capable of destroying what she feared losing. Vanessa's emotions were tangled together. Love became resentment when she felt rejected. Fear became manipulation when abandonment seemed possible. Greed grew from a desperate need for security. Control became a shield against vulnerability. None of those emotions excused what happened, but they explained why the truth was harder to understand than a simple story about a heartless killer. Elena requested another interrogation. Vanessa entered quietly and sat across from her. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. Elena placed copies of the financial records on the table. "You lied about the money." Vanessa looked down. "I needed help. You received help from several men. They wanted to give it." Elena placed the journal beside the records. "And this?" Vanessa stared at the cover. "You read my private thoughts. 2 men are dead." Vanessa's expression hardened. Elena leaned forward. "When did you learn you were HIV positive?" Vanessa remained silent. "Vanessa." Finally she answered. "Before Robert." Elena waited. "And before Marcus?" Vanessa nodded. The admission changed everything. "You knew before both relationships became intimate?" "Yes." "Did you tell either man?" Vanessa shook her head. "Why?" "I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "Losing everything." Elena studied her. "You understood the consequences of keeping that secret." Vanessa looked toward the wall. "I never intentionally infected anyone." Elena did not react. "That wasn't my question." Vanessa's jaw tightened. "People leave when they know the truth." "So you decided they didn't deserve to know?" "No." "Then why conceal it?" Vanessa said nothing. Elena pushed the question further. "Did Robert deserve to die?" Vanessa's eyes flickered. "What about Marcus?" Still nothing. "Do you believe either man deserved what happened?" Vanessa stared at the table. For nearly a minute, she remained silent. Elena watched her carefully. The silence carried anger, grief, fear, and something Elena could not yet name. Vanessa had denied murder. She had admitted deception. She had admitted knowing about the diagnosis. But when given the simplest opportunity to condemn the deaths of the 2 men, she could not say the words. Elena closed the folder. As Vanessa was escorted away, Elena remained seated, staring at the chair in silence. The case had become more complicated. The evidence suggested Vanessa had lied about her relationships, her diagnosis, and the final confrontation. But one question remained unanswered. If Vanessa had truly loved Robert, what had happened inside that apartment to make love, fear, and rage collide so violently? Elena knew the answer was hidden somewhere in those final moments, and she was determined to find it. The silence Vanessa had carried out of the interrogation room followed her into court. Months passed before the case finally reached trial. By then, the story had become national news. Photographs of Vanessa appeared beside headlines describing her as a gold digger, a manipulator, a dangerous lover, and, depending on the commentator, a victim of two wealthy men's jealousy. Inside the courtroom, however, the cameras disappeared behind closed doors. Only evidence mattered. The prosecution began with the timeline. Robert entered Vanessa's building voluntarily. Marcus arrived later. Both men had discovered information about Vanessa's HIV diagnosis. Both had confronted her shortly before their deaths. Then came the financial records. Prosecutors showed payments from former lovers, expensive gifts, hotel reservations, and transfers that demonstrated how Vanessa had repeatedly benefited from intimate relationships. The defense objected to the implication. Money, the attorney argued, was not murder. The judge allowed the evidence for its relevance to motive. Next came the recovered messages. Robert's warnings. Marcus's fear. Vanessa's carefully worded replies. Then prosecutors introduced her journal. Several passages described wealthy men as disposable, while others revealed Vanessa's obsession with control. Yet the defense highlighted something equally important. There was no written confession. No sentence saying she planned to kill Robert. No sentence saying she wanted Marcus dead. The defense attorney stood before the jury and made the distinction clear. "You may dislike Vanessa Cole," he said. "You may believe she lied. You may believe she manipulated people. But dislike is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt." The prosecution answered with a different picture. They argued that Vanessa had created the circumstances leading to the confrontation through years of deception. She knew about her diagnosis. She concealed it. She manipulated both men and understood that they had discovered her secret. The courtroom became a battle over motive. Was Vanessa a calculating predator? Or was she a psychologically damaged woman whose fear, resentment, and need for control finally exploded? Perhaps, the prosecution suggested, she was both. Then Elena Ramirez took the witness stand. She described the investigation carefully, explaining the security footage, phone records, financial evidence, journal entries, and recovered audio. When asked whether Vanessa's original statement matched the evidence, Elena answered plainly, "No." The prosecutor asked why. Because the evidence showed Robert and Marcus came voluntarily. They weren't ambushed at the door. They came expecting a confrontation. And what did the digital evidence reveal? That both men knew Vanessa was hiding something. Elena paused before adding, "The evidence also showed Vanessa knew they were coming." The defense challenged her conclusions. Elena remained composed. She never called Vanessa a monster. She never claimed to know what Vanessa felt. She simply described what the evidence established. After weeks of testimony, the jury left to deliberate. Vanessa sat motionless beside her attorney. The courtroom doors eventually opened. Everyone stood. The foreperson read the verdict. Guilty. The word seemed to drain the room of air. Vanessa did not cry. She did not protest. She slowly turned toward the families of Robert and Marcus. Her expression was difficult to read. Then she whispered, "I never wanted it to end this way." No one knew what she meant. The relationships? The murders? The life she had built? The families heard only the sentence. The judge ordered Vanessa taken into custody, and officers approached her. As she was led away, Elena watched silently. The verdict had answered the legal question, but it could never fully answer the human one. What had happened inside Vanessa long before Robert and Marcus entered her life? And what would remain of her once the glamour, money, lies, and control were finally gone? Outside, reporters waited beneath the courthouse steps. Inside, Vanessa disappeared through a secure doorway. For the first time in years, nobody was waiting to give her anything. No gifts. No promises. No expensive dinners. only the consequences of every secret she had carried too far. Months after the verdict, Chicago had already moved on. The headlines disappeared first. Then the television crews. The apartment stood empty. Inside, the rooms that had once represented luxury and control were stripped of their meaning. The bedroom where Vanessa had kept 2 phones on the same table looked almost ordinary. Robert's family began selling his properties. Every building carried memories of a man they had loved before his name became associated with a murder case. His daughter struggled with the decision. Marcus's relatives faced a different kind of grief. They remembered a man rebuilding his life after divorce. After his death, they replayed old conversations, searching for a warning they might have missed. The city forgot details, but the families could not. Grief ignores headlines, and it does not disappear when cameras leave. It becomes quieter slowly. Public discussion about Vanessa's HIV status continued long after the trial. It did not explain the violence. HIV was not the crime. The disease was not the villain. The tragedy came from secrecy, manipulation, betrayal, fear, and violence, the choices surrounding the diagnosis, and the relationships that followed it. That distinction mattered to Elena Ramirez. She opened the case file one final time. For years, investigators had tried to identify the moment when Vanessa became dangerous. Elena no longer believed there had been one. There had been dozens. A lie told because the truth was frightening. A secret kept because honesty threatened comfort. A gift accepted because money felt safer than trust. A manipulation justified because someone else had caused pain first. An opportunity to tell the truth postponed until there was no safe way left to tell it. Elena closed the file. Outside, Chicago continued moving. Trains crossed the city. Cars filled the streets. Restaurants welcomed new customers. The world had survived the scandal. The families had not. In the final days before the apartment was sold, sunlight entered through the bedroom windows and stretched across the empty floor. Only 2 faint marks remained on the table where 2 phones had once rested. Vanessa had spent years believing money could create safety, luxury could create belonging, and affection could be controlled. But money could buy privacy. It could buy temporary affection. What it could never buy was escape from consequence. Robert's family would live with an absence that money could never repair. Marcus's loved ones would continue asking questions that might never have answers. Because sometimes destruction does not begin with a weapon. Sometimes it begins with a secret. A secret defended once. Then again. And again. Until the truth becomes too dangerous to survive. How many lives can be destroyed when someone decides that their pain gives them the right to control another person's fate?